In a vast and green savanna, ruled by the law of the strongest, there existed a curious hierarchy where the large, powerful, and strong were revered, while the small and weak went unnoticed. At the center of this kingdom, a majestic lion named Azza was the undisputed king. His roars resonated throughout the prairie, and his shadow commanded respect and fear alike. His golden mane waved in the wind, and under his command, the balance of the savanna was assured. Not far from his territory, a tiny and agile mouse named Murdy lived his simple life among burrows, cunningly and swiftly seeking his daily sustenance. One hot afternoon, Azza decided to take advantage of the breeze and rest under his favorite tree. His eyes gently closed to the rhythm of the whispering leaves carried by the wind. Meanwhile, Murdy, always curious, emerged from his hiding place in search of seeds for his dinner. With each careful step, he surveyed the surroundings until his small eyes spotted a large shadow. Intrigued, he cautiously approached until he found himself face to face with the sleeping giant, that terror of the savanna he had heard so much about but had never encountered so closely. The reckless mouse, unable to resist the temptation, decided to climb onto the lion's fur to see up close. He wanted to experience what it meant to be king for a second. Those moments of power, though imaginary, filled him with an excitement described in the tales of his ancestors. In his mischief, however, a slight tickle caused Azza to wake abruptly. With a simple movement of one of his large claws, he managed to catch the little intruder. "How dare you, little insect!" roared the lion, his eyes burning with fury. Murdy's heart seemed to drum in his chest at such a frantic pace that he almost felt it would stop. However, gathering all his courage, the mouse apologized. "Please, great Azza, forgive me. I did not mean to disturb you. I was carried away by curiosity. Please let me live, and I promise I will repay you one day." Azza, used to everyone trembling before his presence, paused for a moment. He had never heard such a strange plea. A small rodent promised to help the king. He considered it a delusion of fear, but there was something in the mouse that inspired a spark of respect. "It is impossible that you, so tiny, could be of any use to me, but while I wait for reason in this madness," he said, laughing, "I will let you go. Go and do not cross my path again." Days passed, and life in the savannah continued without major incidents. However, one afternoon while Azza was patrolling his domain, he strayed too far into a part of the savannah where he usually did not venture. Among the underbrush, a hunter's trap awaited him. Before he could react, a thick net fell upon him, trapping him. He tried to roar and free himself, but each movement only entangled the ropes tighter around his powerful body. The news of the lion's capture spread quickly among the animals of the savannah, but no one dared to approach, fearful of the human hunters who would soon come for their prey. It was then that Murdy, hearing the news, remembered the favor the lion had done for him. Finding the opportunity to prove the value of his word, he hurried to seek out the lion. In a distant and mystical land, nestled between towering mountains and sprawling forests, lay the kingdom of Eldoria. The kingdom was known for its beauty and prosperity, but a dark legend overshadowed its peace: the legend of the fire dragon. Locals whispered tales of this mighty creature, which resided deep in the volcanic crests, a malevolent beast that would allegedly awaken every 100 years to wreak havoc upon the land. As the centennial mark approached, anxiety gripped the inhabitants of Eldoria. The king, a wise and benevolent ruler named King Alden, convened with his council to devise a plan to protect his subjects. Despite the imminent threats posed by the dragon, few were courageous enough to volunteer for the daunting mission to confront the beast. Among those who stepped forward was a young warrior named Kale. Known for his bravery and skill with the sword, Kale was eager to prove himself worthy in the eyes of his king and to the people of Eldoria. King Alden, recognizing Kale's valor, entrusted him with his perilous quest, granting him a magical amulet said to possess protective powers. With determination and a heart full of resolve, Kale embarked on his journey towards the volcanic crests. The path was fraught with danger, from treacherous terrains to ferocious wildlife. Yet Kale pressed forward, driven by an unwavering sense of duty. As night fell on the third day, Kale reached the base of the daunting volcanic mountains. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur, and the ground trembled beneath his feet. Guided by the glow of vibrant lava streams, Kale made his ascent, the heat intensifying with each step. Finally, Kale stood at the entrance of the dragon's lair. The cavern was immense, its walls lined with glittering gems and ancient carvings depicting dragons of yore. The sound of deep, rhythmic breathing resonated through the chamber, a clear sign that the legendary dragon was near. Taking a deep breath, Kale entered the lair, the amulet clutched firmly in his hand. Suddenly, a roar echoed, and the fire dragon emerged from the shadows. Its scales glistened like molten metal, eyes burning with an ancient, fiery fury. It was a sight both terrifying and awe-inspiring. As the dragon unleashed a torrent of flame, Kale instinctively raised the amulet. A shimmering barrier enveloped him, deflecting the inferno. Seizing the opportunity, Kale charged forward, determination fueling his every move. The battle was fierce, echoing with the clashing symphony of steel and roar. In a climactic moment, Kale noticed a chink in the dragon's scale, a vulnerability near its heart. Mustering all his strength, he launched his blade towards the exposed spot. With a thunderous cry, the dragon stumbled back, its flames subsiding into embers. It collapsed, finally subdued. Exhausted but triumphant, Kale emerged from the lair, greeted by the rising sun as it bathed the land in golden light. News of his victory spread like wildfire across Eldoria, and upon his return, he was hailed as a hero. King Alden, filled with gratitude, honored Kale with a grand ceremony, celebrating not just his bravery, but also the peace restored to the kingdom. The legend of the fire dragon became a tale of courage and hope, a reminder of the valor that lay within each heart. And so, the warrior returned to his village, his spirit enriched with the knowledge that he had defended the land he loved. Though stories of dragons would continue to instill both fear and wonder, Eldoria thrived under the watchful gaze of its hero. In Kale's heart, the real battle was always within, a struggle between fear and courage, and he had emerged victorious. In a small and bustling city, where the past intertwines with the present through narrow streets and ancient facades, lived a peculiar man named Javier. He was not an ordinary person. Since childhood, he had felt an inexplicable attraction to clocks and all devices that measure time. With each tick-tock, his curiosity grew. Something inside him told him that time was more than a sequence of seconds, minutes, and hours. Near the central square, between an old bookstore and a traditional cafe, stood Javier's workshop. An extraordinary place that housed hundreds of clocks from all eras. Huge grandfather clocks, delicate pocket watches, and even ancient Egyptian artifacts that attempted to capture the passage of the stars. However, at the back of the workshop, hidden under an old dusty tarp, rested his masterpiece, a time machine. The time machine was not like those that appear in science fiction novels. It was a device of intricate mechanics, filled with gears, levers, and spinning spheres that reflected lights and shadows in a hypnotic display. Javier had dedicated years to its construction, inspired by fragments of ancient manuscripts and discredited scientific theories. For him, Each piece was imbued with the dream of transcending the barriers of time. One night, when the sound of the city faded to the whisper of the wind and the distant howl of some ghost train, Javier decided it was time to test his creation. With a trembling yet determined sigh, he turned one of the main levers and activated the device. The workshop filled with a hopeful hum, and before his astonished eyes, the spheres began to spin at a dizzying speed. Suddenly, everything stopped. Javier felt a strange sensation of dizziness, and when he refocused his gaze, he found himself in a place that felt familiar, yet strangely different. He was in the same central square where his workshop had stood, but now it was filled with horse-drawn carriages and people dressed in garments from centuries past. Apparently, he had managed to travel to the past. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, Javier adopted a discreet persona to avoid drawing attention while exploring his surroundings. He discovered that he was in the same city he had always lived in, but the year was 1850. For days, he observed the life unfolding in the 19th century, fascinated by the details he had only known from history books. However, he began to sense a growing unease. It didn't take long for him to realize that no matter how much he admired that past time, he did not belong there. It was then that fate intervened. While walking through a local fair, he saw a clock hanging from an antique stall. It was a clock he recognized by a personal engraving he had made many years ago, even before building the machine. He understood that this was the anchor he needed to return. Without fully comprehending how or why, he took the clock in his hands and closed his eyes, wishing to return to his present. When Javier opened his eyes, he was back in his workshop. The hum of the machine ceased, and the spheres gradually stopped until they left no trace of their frenzy. Everything had returned to normal, or so it seemed. For a moment, he allowed himself to savor success. He had achieved the impossible, although he knew that his adventure must remain a secret, for the world was not ready to know the true nature of time.